Peace and love. This is your girl, Karina Dean. And in the eye of Karina, I have a reflection to make about my Chiron placement in the ninth house. And I spend a lot of time looking online for people who interpret this placement, and there have been some really good ones. But then it dawned on me something that I haven't heard yet, and I feel like I have to put it out there for anyone who has Chiron in the ninth house like myself. And you're dealing with these energies in which it doesn't manifest on you physically as much, right? It's about a philosophy. It's about the mind and the mental ability to see the big picture, to see things as they are or as they could be, to have optimism, to have a sense of abundance, because the ninth house is originally ruled by Sagittarius. And Chiron is the wounded healer. Chiron is the placement that has a lot to do with our insecurities. And it comes from our development as children, but it can still continuously manifest in adulthood. And when you do have Chiron in its most transformed place, right? When you do access Chiron as the wounded healer, you constantly feel this wound. You constantly understand that it may never be completely healed, but you are able to heal others. Now, for me on my journey, I'm not really sure if I have completely healed myself from Chiron in the ninth house, but this is what I know to be true about this placement and what I think my journey is now. So again, what is the ninth house? The ninth house is our philosophy, our outlook on life. It is how we see the world in its most objective way, the bigger picture. The ninth house also rules over our teachers, our gurus, and our preachers. It rules over our father's teaching as well, because this is Jupiter's placement, and Jupiter represents the father. Jupiter also represents the husband, and because this is Jupiter's or Sagittarius' natural home, this can also represent the husband to a degree, right? So, because this is long distance travel, let's start with that. I know from my experience as a child that I constantly wanted to travel, but I've always had this fear of airplanes. I've always had fear of being in foreign lands and being uncomfortable to a degree in foreign lands. And I have traveled a little bit, but long distance travels to me have been for missionary work when I was a child, growing up. And I did have a couple of injuries when I did do long distance traveling. I also had a fear of my mother's homeland in Jamaica because of many stories and told to me about what, you know, she didn't grow up in the best place, right? She didn't grow up in the nice, rich neighborhoods of Jamaica. She grew up basically in the slums. And there's been lots of stories that have been told to me as a child about how dangerous it was and how, they really just got by, they got through it. So when I would go to Jamaica, I would have paralyzing fear going there. So I know that my Chiron has looked at foreign places in a way in which it's not necessarily like so much joy to go and explore. There's always some kind of lesson that I'm learning and when in my travels. And I've actually been a little restricted in my travels. I've only gone out of country to 2 places, in my life. Now, along with that foreign travel is the concept of culture. And this is what really dawns on me about Chiron in the ninth house, is that your relationship to culture is kind of off and jaded. Now, for me, my father and my father's father taught me a lot about Black history in America. And they emphasized it so much that I really felt like growing up that I had an obligation to Black people, and that was a very big thing for me, to understand my history, the struggle of Black people, and to do the work that I'm called to do for Black people. And some of the things that I've done, like I had a lot of theater education, but kind of like went to school for my theater education, right? Being on stage, being a theater actress and a singer, but found myself leading a cultural organization for Black and Hispanics, and it was amazing. But I completely like pushed to the side my education, my theater education, my dramatic arts education, and went straight for, trying to create some sort of revolutionary image for this organization. And I think that that had a lot to do with my obligations to my culture and feeling like that is what I'm supposed to do. And that's always been carried with me, being Black and the struggle of being Black, right? And I've always felt like I should belong to this group of people. But what you find is that there is not just one ideology amongst Black people. There are many different kinds of Black people who have many different kinds of ideologies. And I've always found that even though I struggle to be a part of the unification, it's been difficult because, in my experience, being Black, because we have this shared ancestral experience, that we want to be like as one in how we see the world and how we operate. And it's just not true, because you can't be individual. You have to be a part of, well, this is how we feel about sexuality. This is how we feel about religion. This is how we are. And it's just not real. It never really worked for me with my Chiron placement, because I don't just go along with one ideology. I am an individual as well. And so I've struggled with that a lot. And my work with astrology allows me to be beyond my own skin color. It allows me to be a star, a cosmic being, that is within this body, but also without this body, you know. Now, also, what I also realized is that growing up, even though I was very strongly schooled about the struggle of Black people, I suffered a lot of issues with acceptance being Black where I grew up, because I was in a suburban area and a lot of people in this area were Black and white. But I found myself to be, well educated. My parents were very specific about me doing my work, and I was in the smarter classes. And I would sometimes get like a lot of pushback from other Black peers of mine about being, smart or in a class filled with more white people. And that was just the reality. Most of the Black people were in the maybe medium classes, like your average classes or lower. And I was always being in the advanced classes, and that would have a sprinkling of Black people, but majority white kids. And that was how I experienced myself growing up in the culture. Also, a lot of the kids, especially the Black kids, would say that I wanted to be white and that I spoke white, because of me having having strong standards by my parents to, excuse me, to be intelligent. And I struggled with that because I was like, well, do I want to be white? I ended up having a lot of white friends because I was in the same classes as them. I did end up having two very great friends who were ethnic, Black and Trinidadian, which is Black too. But basically, I always wanted to be close and accepted by Black people. But even as a kid, I struggled with that culture. Now, In my personal chart, my Venus is retrograde in Aries, which is her detriment, right? But she makes a sextile to my Chiron in the ninth house. And I've always felt like my Venus retrograde was a significator of how I dress and fashion myself, because I always struggles with my own fashion. And it probably does have a little bit to do with it because of Venus being in Aries and its detriment, and being retrograde, right? But there are a lot of retrograde Venus people who are designers, who are fashion designers. So I'm like, well, why is this placement not speaking enough to why I've never been able to really put together an ensemble of clothes? And I have this great eye for it, being a Taurus, being double Libra rising in Taurus. I look at fashion, I know what I like, I know what it works, but then when it would come onto my body, it would be a different story. And I would struggle with this my entire life, even up until this day, right? And sometimes I dress up and sometimes I'm just like, whatever. And even when I do dress up, I don't always have that confidence in dressing up. Well, it dawned on me that um, the ninth house has to do with culture. And because I have Chiron there, that the fashion, a lot of fashion choices come from your culture, how strong and confident you are in culture, right? Now, not everybody wears like their ancestral garments, but if they have a strong sense of belonging to a culture, right? Even if it's belonging to hip hop culture, right? Or pop culture, whatever, then they can express themselves through that avenue. And that's one thing that I feel like is missing from the understanding of fashion, is that it is very cultural related, right? And because I have Chiron here, speaking to my Venus, I have the ability to find fashion for myself, but I have to first deal with these wounds when it comes to culture. And this I know to be true because I've struggled with culture. Again, another part of my personal journey is that my mother is Jamaican and my father is Black American. So that also has been a dichotomy in my family about, am I really more Jamaican or am I really more Black? And then I don't really I didn't really feel like I fit into Black culture, which for me growing up in the 90s was hip hop, style. I didn't really do that either. So I struggled. And I struggled in the ideologies, I struggled in the philosophies, and I struggled in the material realm of culture and fashion. And I feel like when I am really in my wounded healer of Chiron, that I will have figured out what makes me, feel good and what kind of clothes I could wear that makes me express myself wholly. And I'm working on it, but it's a slow process for me. Now, the other thing is the teachings of the Father and the gurus that come out of the ninth house. And I have found that a lot of my relationship to my father is related to, something actually that, happened through his choices. And I kind of rejected a lot of what he taught me for a long time because I was upset with him and his choices and how it affected my family. And this was a process that I had to go through, but I recently started bringing back a lot of the things that my father taught me, and I feel like it's necessary for me to embrace my father and what he has taught me, even despite how he may have affected my family in a negative way. I can't reject his teachings, but I did, and I believe that too was a Chiron in the ninth house placement. Along with that, one of the things he did tell me was his relationship to my old preacher and how he really didn't um, respect this man anymore, basically. And that is a ninth house as well. It's the father's teaching, and who I highly respected this preacher, and he didn't. And like that clash, like that is perfect ninth house insecurities and me not really understanding or being able to accept the fact that these two men in my life were also in their own struggle with each other, right? Then the last part of Chiron in the ninth house is your beliefs and your religion. And I really think that this I have been able to overcome, and I'm doing it right now on this channel, which is dealing with the fact that I was very strong in my Christian beliefs and then moved out of it and completely rejected the Christian beliefs and got almost very radical about it. And then after starting astrology and feeling like, yes, astrology is the answer, astrology brought me back to a lot of my Christian beliefs. And I have now been able to and desire to want to learn all of the religions and find how they are connected to each other. And it has brought me to a very strong peace of mind when it comes to my philosophy on life and my objective when it comes to the teachings of religion. I now don't reject them, but embrace them all. I want to see and explore them all. That's the ninth house, freeing itself from that Chiron. And I don't feel very rigid as I once was before. And I was rigid when I was as a Christian, and then I was rigid when I rejected Christianity. So astrology was my path back into embracing all belief sets. And so this is what I have so far, and this is my personal story about Chiron in the ninth house. And if I come across any more, I will definitely make another video about it, but this is my personal take on it. And it's a very odd place, but it's all about that mental heightenedness, that mental place where you are dealing with what you've learned and how to apply it. And then if what you have learned, is truly right, and you deal with right and wrong very often. And what's coming to me is my last thing, because this video is getting way too long, but the last thing that's coming to me is that ninth house is higher education. And I did go to college for the dramatic and theater arts, and I loved the dramatic and theater arts, but did not continue my work because of my, right, like I said earlier, my issues with needing to be a leader of a cultural organization. I kind of pushed it off to the side, but then I had more jaded beliefs about the theater as well, and I did not pursue my love of the theater after I left college. I had so much insecurity about being accepted and not feeling, and actually also just not being prepared, that what I went for college, right? Ninth house is college learning. My Chiron being there, I did not manifest that. And so I'm coming back to this place, honestly. And on this channel, you will see me either make this choice to go back or not. Either go back to school and change my my studies, my higher learning studies, or go back to what I went to school for and try to make it a part of how I make a living and what my career is. So I'm not sure yet. And so I know that this Chiron has levels to it, and that's also what I've been dealing with. So this is Chiron in the ninth house for me. And if you have Chiron in the ninth house, please share with me your story. And I'd love to hear how this placement has worked for you, and where are you on that path. This is your girl, Karina Dean. This wasn't really a teaching video as much as a reflection video. And yeah, I'm also not necessarily seeing myself as a teacher, and I don't really think that people respect me as a teacher. Therefore, that's why this channel is not about me teaching as much as it's about me sharing what I know. Question mark. Peace and love.